Okay, let's do a quick recap of the types of studies. All right, so observational studies, controlled experiments, and surveys are kind of the bread and butter of where we're going to get our data from. And remember, statistics is all about doing data analysis and making decisions from data. We need to know where our data comes from. So observational studies, simple, you observe. You cannot uncover cause and effect. Controlled experiments, simple, you control. You are directly intervening in some way, and you are attempting to understand cause and effect. Surveys, you're asking questions. You are not trying to uncover cause and effect, and you are not trying to actually put some control or change any behaviors. Now, so for an observational study, digging a little bit deeper, we're attempting to gather data without influencing any variables. It is important to do random sampling. So just because there's random sampling doesn't mean it's an experiment. You can still randomly sample and do an observational study. So say, for example, I go to the records department and sample 5,000 records of the 100,000 that exist. There are ethical concerns because you want to make sure that you're not sampling or gathering data about things that are sensitive or that could identify individuals in your study. Your conclusions are only about associations. They are not cause and effect. Controlled experiments, you are intentionally trying to control the situation in some way or another. So you are trying to group people into similar units. So then you've got one group called the control group that mimics normal as much as possible. Then you've got the experimental group where you're trying to actually figure out what sort of thing is actually going to cause some sort of an effect. Randomization is important because you're trying to control for all of the lurking variables that could be there that are not part of the treatment and control groups. So lurking variables might be, hey, if you're just having people watch America's Got Talent with and without the judges, it might be that gender is a lurking variable. So you want to do random assignments so that the genders kind of get equally split up. Or maybe there's some other lurking variable. Now you want this to be ethical. You want to have your experiment reviewed so that you know you're not actually breaking any rules. Typically, this means that you have to go through the institutional review board for whatever institution you're working for. This is the only type of experiment that can actually give you cause and effect relationships. Now, surveys, this is essentially like a questionnaire, or you're calling to ask somebody questions. It's similar to an observational study, but you're literally interacting with people and you're literally just asking questions. You cannot draw cause and effect, but you can look for associations. So let's just look at one example here of a controlled experiment, because I think this is where most of the confusion comes in. You've already answered the question about America's Got Talent. So let's just see what the control, the randomization, etc. are. Okay, now the control is we're going to watch with and without the judges. These are our control and our experimental groups. Without the judges mimicking maybe normal, and with the judge is mimicking the control. The thing that we actually want to study is whether or not the judges have an impact on what people decide. Now, randomization. We split you into two groups so that all the lurking variables that are not there, let's say it again. We've done this randomly so that all the lurking variables that we've not actually split out are maybe controlled for. So things like gender, maybe things like geographical location, maybe things like what other TV programs you tend to watch, maybe things like the type of music you really enjoy. We're not controlling for all of those. Randomization is supposed to be taking care of all of those other things for us and splitting people in a roughly equal way. We don't know, right? But splitting people into the different groups so that those things are present in both groups. Now, there's probably nothing unethical about this unless you think listening to those judges would be harmful to people in some way. I personally do, because I find this show highly annoying. Replication. Now, if we had access to the videos, we could certainly reproduce this whole study. Now, since this is a controlled experiment, we could actually conclude a cause and effect relationship from this experiment. So what I hope is that this is a good recap of what you learned from the reading. There's obviously way more depth in the reading than what I'm going to talk through. That's up to you. This is an online course. Some of this has to happen during the reading.